All right, so for the first time in a very long time, we are doing an episode of Flashback. I've been meaning to make this episode for quite some time, and for reasons that will become clear, now is the perfect time to make it. But before we do that, also for the first time in a long time, we're going to do mail, because I miss doing the mail with you guys. I know some of you guys like it, some of you guys don't, and that's okay. Just a quick reminder before we get started, I always put the mailing address of the show down in the video description. The purpose of that is so people can send in postcards, and I send you back a postcard. As much as I appreciate it when people want to send other things to the show, that's not why I have a P.O. box. That's not why we do the mail. Please do not feel like you need to send anything else into the show. To be very, very honest, it makes my day when I go to the P.O. box and there's a postcard from a viewer. So there's no need for anybody to send anything else. So, again, around the world, if you send me a postcard, I will send you back a handwritten Classic Gaming Quarterly postcard. So anyway, let's check out the mail. So this is about 6 months worth of mail, but it's not very much mail, so calm down. I've tried to put this in chronological order. So the first one we have here is from Barrett and Mark in, does that say Boonton Township, New Jersey, I think. I believe we've gotten something from them before. This was a belated Christmas, if you want to call it a card. Yeah, Christmas postcard. You can see them. It says, from the art desk of Barrett and Mark. And I don't know if it's going to want to focus on that, but that's pretty cool. And there's just a handwritten thing here. Thanks for the urgently needed cheers. Love the Christmas specials. So thank you to both of you, Barrett and Mark. Next, we've got a postcard here from Marcelo down in Brazil, who sends me lots of postcards, and I appreciate it. He says, I went to this brewery 2 weeks ago in Santa Barbara, Brazil, not Santa Barbara, California, I assume. And I took this picture, and I liked it so much, I had this card printed out. The beer in the photo is a Vit beer, which I like those. And there's the picture. Yeah, pretty cool. So thank you, Marcelo. Next, from David in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. When I was a kid, I used to wear Oshkosh overalls, Oshkosh bagosh or whatever. And I won't read the entire note here. He says, thanks for the shout out to my wife and daughters. I think I did that on a live stream one time. And but the postcard here is of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which, well, here, I'll read the description for that. This 729-foot Edmund Fitzgerald, built in 1958, I should hold it up, is the most famous of modern-day Great Lakes shipwrecks. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar. There was a Gordon Lightfoot song called The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Pretty sad, frankly, but and that happened in 1975. But anyway, interesting postcard. So thank you, David. Next, this is from Chicken Fingers. Remember, we've gotten a postcard from Chicken Fingers before that had some cool artwork on it. Chicken Fingers, you didn't put your return address on here, so I was not able to send you another postcard. If you decide you'd like one, all you have to do is email me. This one is from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Looks pretty cool. I am a fan of national parks. He says, more Let's Reads, please. I'm planning on doing more Let's Reads. This video I'm working on right now for the main channel is like an albatross around my neck. And I'm just trying to get it done so that I can move on. In fact, here it is. I'm working on it. Next, this was a very cool postcard. I'm not going to say this person's name correctly. Keonet. Keonet. If it's not Keonet, I apologize. This is a great postcard, though. This is actually a vintage postcard. You can see there from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Of course, the Indy 500 is one of my favorite races to watch every year. I always say that's like Christmas is the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, because we get the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indy 500 on the same day. So yeah, I don't want to read people's cards on camera. So next here. So I got this one from the Living Planet Aquarium in, I assume, Salt Lake City. Whoever it is that sent this to me, I got this at the beginning of last month. You didn't put your return address, and the way it's signed is with their signature, so I don't even know what your name is. So I apologize if somebody sent this assuming that I would know who it was from. I'm just not sure. So once again, feel free to email me if you want to clarify and or if you would like a postcard back. Next from, we have to open this one to find out. I believe this one's from Jeremy, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Jeremy from Northern Virginia, we'll just say. And I'm not going to read Jeremy's letter to you guys, but he mentions, and I only bring this up because people talk about this episode a lot. I don't even remember which episode of Flashback it was. It was one of the very first ones. Where, sorry, my kitten's trying to break into the room, where I talked about the loss of my dad. And so that's really kind of struck a chord with a lot of people who maybe went through something similar. So he wrote a note mostly about that. And this is another vintage postcard. This one is the Rose Bowl down in Pasadena, which I understand the Rose Bowl has, or at least had, a very good flea market that goes on, I don't know, in the parking lot or something, I guess. The Rose Bowl, of course, is in the Los Angeles area, which is really nowhere near here. It would be about a 6 or 7 hour drive, I think, from here. So I don't really make it down there. And this next thing, I don't know if you can really consider it as fan mail or not. I guess I kind of would, but that's not why this person sent this to me. This guy, Benjamin, on Twitter, tweeted like this. Boy, she really wants to come in here. Tweeted like this picture of this envelope art that he had made for, I'm just going to let her in because she's not going to give up. Come on, monkey face. Yeah, now she doesn't want to come in. This envelope art that he had made for the Player One podcast, but I guess somehow they didn't want it or something. I don't really quite understand exactly what happened. And I said that if they didn't want it, I would take it. And so he ended up sending it to me, but he sent it to me in an envelope. He made like envelope art for my show. So, and you notice PC Engine. So this guy pays attention. So that's pretty awesome artwork. So thank you, Benjamin. And just so that people aren't left hanging, here is the Player One podcast envelope art that's inside there. So I haven't decided what I want to do with that yet. Like, I kind of wanted to like frame it and send it to Greg Seward, but then at the same time it's like, well, if he wanted it, then he would have taken it. So why would I send it to him? I don't really know. See, now she wants to play with my microphone cable is the problem. No. Here, by the way, this is Ladybird. Not named after the former First Lady. Also not named after the movie. I don't know why I named her Ladybird. Hello. I just did. So here, how about if you go on the windowsill? That's exciting. Okay, and then the last thing we've got here came from Kurt in Wisconsin, who sent me, he made me a Streets of Rage 4 soundtrack cassette tape. He says, I want to say thank you for all you do at CGQ. Your mixtapes are awesome, so I made a tape for you. It's not a mix, but a soundtrack for Streets of Rage 4. I hope you enjoy. Please keep up the great work. Kurt from Wisconsin. So thanks, man. This is awesome. This cat situation is going to be a problem. No. No. She doesn't understand no at all. So I'm just trying to keep her from biting the microphone cord. Now what are you going to do? She's like 3.5 months old, so she has more energy than she knows what to do with. Yeah, see, she's not done with the microphone cord. No, you can't play with that. No. So anyway, that's it for mail. So now we're going to talk about the topic of the day, which I made the title of the video Barcelona 92, but I really was going to talk a little bit about the Olympics, but then also talk about why specifically the 1992 Barcelona Olympics sort of have a special place for me, which is going to actually require me to tell you like 3 backstories, so sorry about that. But first, just to talk about the Olympics a little bit, obviously the Olympics are going on right now. The Tokyo 2020/2021 Olympics are going on. To be honest, with each passing, well, not year, but each passing Olympics, I guess, I just find myself getting like less and less interested in them. Like, I'm watching the Olympics this time around, but kind of not really. I mean, you know, when I was a kid growing up, I really, you know, I drank the Kool-Aid as far as the Olympics went, and you know, I really thought it was about, all the nations of the world coming together in peace and sending all their best athletes and, you know, this whole altruistic thing. And then, you know, slowly you come to realize, you know, you take the rose-colored glasses off and you realize it's just about money, the same as any other sport, which there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but it takes some of the magic away that I think NBC tries very hard to sell to people. But anyway, I still like the Olympics. I'm not trying to bash on them or anything. But anyway, so for me personally, the first Olympic Games that I remember, and I'm really, I guess, just talking about Summer Olympics. We can talk about Winter Olympics some other time. Is the '84 Olympics in Los Angeles. That's the first Olympics I remember watching. I would have been 7, so that's not too terribly young to form memories anyway. But I remember like my dad had to go to LA for some reason for like a business trip sometime around that time, not necessarily when the Olympics were happening. And I remember he brought me back. They had like this mascot that they were, you know, sort of pushing that Olympics. And it was like a bald eagle, like the American bald eagle character, you know, kind of dressed up like Uncle Sam a little bit. And I think probably had like the Olympic rings on his chest. I don't have that thing anymore, so I don't remember what it looks like, but it's just something I remember from those times. But I also remember like sitting in the living room and watching the Olympics with my dad and my stepmom. And for some reason, the sport that I have a clear memory that I remember watching was the indoor track cycling, which is, you know, not a popular Olympic sport really, but that's the one I remember watching. So the '88 Olympics, as I said, I didn't look any of this up beforehand, so I'm just going off of memory. I believe the '88 Olympics were in Seoul, South Korea. Summer of '88, I was still living with my dad and my stepmom, but that was like the end of that summer is when I moved back with my mom. So to be honest, I don't have any specific memories of. I'm sure I watched the games with my dad and stepmom. I don't really have any solid memories of that. And so then we get to '92. So this is what I'm gonna have to tell like 3 stories that I'll try to keep short to kind of set the backstory for this. So the first thing we have to talk about a little bit more is my stepdad. So Ken, I talked about him, I think, in the last Christmas special. He was the one that wrapped up all of our gifts with the Sunday Funnies. So Ken and my mom have been together since I was in like kindergarten. So I've known him for almost as long as I've had, you know, formed memories for. But Ken's a little older than my mom. So, well, actually, he's like 20 years older than my mom. But Ken grew up during the Great Depression. Like, that's how old he is. He was like a kid during the Great Depression. And his family was very poor, so he really felt the effects of that. His dad, I'm not making any of this up. His dad, they had 4 kids, all boys. Like, so Ken's got 3 brothers, or had 3 brothers. I think he's the only one left because he was the youngest. Their dad just like you see this in like movies and stuff, but his dad just left and not making this up, joined the circus, became like a circus clown, and just like I don't think they ever saw him again that I know of. So, that made it even worse because you're in the middle of the Great Depression. Now you have a single mother with 4 kids. And, so like Ken kind of had to grow up fast. Even when he was in like junior high school, I think he had to work during the summers. Like, he had to work at a slaughterhouse. So, he's got stories about that. But, Ken went to college, like joined the Navy, and really made something out of himself, as far as he made a success out of his life considering his humble beginnings. Although what's interesting is that Ken's brothers started a concrete company, and which they ended up later selling to some big concrete conglomerate or something, and so they all became like millionaires. So like relatively speaking, Ken was the one that did the worst, even though he did just fine. So like in the 70s, Ken bought this piece of land right near Yosemite National Park. Like, you actually had to go into Yosemite National Park to get to it, although the land itself is not in the park, because then of course it wouldn't be for sale. And he built a cabin up there, but the cabin is a dome. Like, it's a geodesic dome, which is like a dome made out of triangles. Like, I think if you ever watch, if you grew up watching Nickelodeon, there was that show, You Can't Do That on Television. And I think kind of the main stage where stuff was happening between the skits, if you look in the background, there's like a geodesic dome coming up. That's like the only example of one I can think of. But it was like this kit home. Like, I don't know if some of you guys have heard of the term craftsman homes or craftsman houses. And that was because you could buy a kit out of the Sears catalog to build a house. This was back in like, I don't know, the 30s, I guess, 20s, 30s. And a lot of those houses are still, I think there's probably some craftsman homes here in my neighborhood because I live in an old neighborhood. If you ever watched that show, Boardwalk Empire, agent, I forgot his name, the guy who was the alcohol agent that ended up kind of going rogue or whatever, they show that in the show. Like, he bought, they might not have called it a craftsman house for like, branding reasons or whatever, but he built a kit house, and he bought a kit house and built it. So it's the same concept. Like, Ken ordered out of a catalog a kit to build this. Well, it didn't have to be a cabin; it could just be a house. In fact, somewhere around here, outside of town, there's another one that somebody lives in. Because it's a regular house. It's not like it's not like a yurt or something. Like, it's a proper framed house. It just happens to be a dome, and I guess they tried to make those popular in the 70s. So Ken bought this land that was on like the side of a hill and had to build, they had to put in the stilts so that he could build like the platform or whatever to build this dome on top of, which I guess, according to him, he did that. Like, he would hire contractors for things that he knew he couldn't do himself, but like they may have come in, for instance, and poured the footings for the stilts, I would imagine. But he did a lot of the work himself. But growing up, I never went, like I said, I've known Ken since I was 5, and I didn't go to the dome for the first time until I was in high school. So this dome was like this mysterious thing where like Ken, like 1 or 2 weekends a month, wasn't around. Oh, Ken's going up to the dome. And I had to have this idea in my head of like, oh, what's the dome, And I finally got to go up there. But so you have to know what the dome is. That's story number 1. And then really the fact that Ken grew up in the Depression is kind of story number 2. Well, that reminds me of another one I forgot to tell that's also important. So Ken almost went to the Olympics. So Ken put himself, if I remember this correctly, Ken put himself through college, undergraduate, on an athletic scholarship. Yeah, he did. He put himself through college. He got an athletic scholarship for wrestling because for some reason he was really good at wrestling. And so he went to like whatever the Olympic trials are for wrestling. And I forgot, this would have been in the 50s. Like, I don't know what years in the 50s there were Olympic games. I'm not going to make you wait while I count backwards. 52 maybe? All right, I don't want to waste your time. But anyway, he didn't make it into the Olympics, but he was like, I don't think he was an alternate either. Like, I think there's like, there's the team that makes it to the Olympics, and then there's a couple of alternates. And I think he was like one guy off of being the alternate, which means you're still pretty darn good. I mean, you'd still have to be one of like the top 10 wrestlers or whatever in the nation. So because of that, Ken was very interested in the Olympics, and that was the point of just telling that little blurb. Is there anything else? No. Okay. So now we get to the part of the episode that maybe this is why it's taken me a while to make this episode, because I have to kind of tell some personal stuff that maybe lately I've had some misgivings about that I just need to get over, I guess. But this is the kind of thing where I've gotten a lot of letters from people. It's kind of the same thing I got, the letter from Jeremy talking about how my episode about losing my dad helped other people because they went through the same thing. I've gotten a lot of letters from people who tell me that watching my show helps them through another mental issue that they have to deal with. And that's kind of why I want to talk about this now, is just, I guess so that people know that, you're not alone and whatever. So going all the way back to when I was a little kid, I would say I was always like a scared kid, if that makes sense. Like, as an example, I didn't learn how to ride a bike until I was like 10 because I was scared, right? Like the idea of getting on a bike that didn't have training wheels on it, I was so scared I was going to get hurt that I didn't want to do it. Or like we'd go to like the community pool or something, and there'd be like the normal diving board, and then there'd be like a 3-meter diving board. And like I wouldn't want to go off the 3-meter diving board because I was scared. So, and same thing, like, I would get picked on by other kids when I was a kid, and I wouldn't want to stand up for myself and fight them because I was scared. Like, well, what if he punches me in the face and it hurts or whatever? And, so like when I was growing up, if a kid was like that, you would just say that the kid was a coward. Like that was sort of how I felt about myself, and probably how other people felt about me, is like, well, he's just a coward and he just needs to like toughen up or whatever. And I think that now we have a better understanding, of that not necessarily being the case. So in 1992, I already talked about in January, my dad passed away. And then in June, school ended, and basically that same day, like the last day of school, my best friend moved away. So in the span of 6 months, I lost my dad, I lost my best friend, and school ending, you might think, well, isn't that a good thing? Well, for me, it really wasn't, because as much as I hated school, especially when I was in high school, I hated high school, but like I needed the routine, if that makes sense. Like not having the routine, the daily routine and the weekly routine, just caused problems for me, because I just like, I would stay home. My mom still went to work. My grandma still did whatever she did. I didn't necessarily have anywhere to go on a given day, especially with Stuart being gone that summer. And so, it made me feel uncomfortable, I guess. Like I needed the routine to feel safe. Maybe that is a better way of putting it. I'm not really sure. And then that summer, we thought, like, my grandma was having some health problems, and there was talk that, maybe she had something really wrong with her. Like, I don't know why, but they thought like, oh, maybe she has leukemia, which I don't know what made them think that, but that's what people, the doctors or whoever, thought for a while they were waiting for like the tests to come back. And I was always very close to my grandmother. Like, I mean, she was, especially once we moved in with them, she was like a second mother to me. But even before then, like I've talked about before, we only lived like a block away from my grandparents, so I was very close to my grandparents. My grandfather, unfortunately, passed away when I was 12, so my grandma lived by herself, but then we moved in with her when I was 13. And at that point, she really became like a second mother to me, especially because, as I entered my teen years, I started to not get along as well with my mom. I guess I was just starting to go through like a rebellious phase a little bit. But like I never really had that problem with my grandma. So we always got along very well. So the idea that maybe she was, sick with something serious just added to my stress levels. Because like I'd already dealt with quite a bit of loss that year. And now here it is, potentially you're going to have more. And without having sort of the safety blanket of my routine being school to at least help me through that, it like magnified it and made it even worse. And to compound problems further, my mom was not always around. Like sometimes my mom would go spend the night. My stepdad, but they weren't married yet, I should mention. My mom and my stepdad didn't get married and start living together until I went off to college. So they were just like, boyfriend, girlfriend up until that point. But so, sometimes she would go spend the night at his house, or sometimes they would go on like a weekend trip, up to the Bay Area or something, and I'd be home alone with my grandma. And in my mind, like my grandmother might be terminally ill, and I'm alone in the house with her. And so that really freaked me out. Now, obviously, I would say the problem wasn't actually that bad, or my mom would not have left the house. But in my mind, I had really blown the situation up to be like this huge deal, and on top of the fact of the other things I was kind of dealing with, my stress levels were very high. And that summer, especially if my mom was not around, like I would start having sort of like these episodes where it's very hard to describe, but it's almost like your perception of reality gets altered in a bad way. I'm saying not in a good way, like if you did something recreationally. But I mean, just to explain it, I didn't understand what was happening at the time. I didn't understand why I was like a cowardly kid. I didn't understand why that summer I started having these like episodes, and it makes it worse because then you think, well, am I going crazy? Like you literally think maybe I'm going crazy. Like what's wrong with me that I'm having these little episodes where like I'm freaking out, and I had nobody to tell. So I never told my mom. I never told my grandma that something was wrong that was going on with me. And that makes it only even worse. But it wasn't until I was in college that I sought some help for it and found out that what was wrong is that I had an anxiety problem. And that summer was when I started having panic attacks, which I had to deal with panic attacks. I don't really get them anymore, which I would say is because I've gotten, sort of treatment for it and like talk therapy. But also just learning what the problem is really helps. It's like now I can have a panic attack and I know I'm just having a panic attack. I know it's going to go away if I just do this, that, and the other thing to make it better. But then I didn't know any of that. And so then it's like you already have this disorder where your anxiety really is fear. Like you're fearful of something horrible happening. And in fact, what you're fearful of is the worst case scenario of whatever happening. Like, I don't want to ride a bike without training wheels because what if I fall off and land on my face or whatever? Or I don't want to jump off the 3-meter diving board because what if I land wrong and I break my neck or something? And to somebody that doesn't have an anxiety problem, that probably sounds ridiculous, but anybody watching this who has an anxiety problem knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's your mind goes always into this worst case scenario situation. And if you let it, it will ruin your life because it'll run your life. And I later found out that it runs in my family. And in fact, I have a cousin who has full-blown obsessive compulsive disorder, which is just like an extreme version of anxiety disorder. Because like people with obsessive compulsive disorder, they come up with these little routines or little things that they have to do to stop whatever the worst case scenario thing is from happening. Well, if I always put on my right shoe first and then my left shoe, and I make sure I do all these other little things, then bad things won't happen. And that my cousin has to deal with that. Thankfully, I don't have to deal with that. But that's what's interesting is my grandmother, I think, had that problem. My mom has that problem. I have that problem. I just mentioned my cousin. But when I was a teenager, I didn't know any of that. And I just thought I was sort of, you think that you blame yourself because you think there's something wrong with you. Well, I'm just a coward, right? The same things you have to hear from other people, you put those things on yourself, and it's pretty bad. But anyway, that summer I started having these panic attacks, and which was really not, it was really bad. But the reason I'm bringing all that up, aside from the fact that, like I said, I want the people who watch my show who have the same problem to know that, I know what it's like, and I have the same problem. So the fact that somebody would use my show as a way to help them through it when they're having anxiety or panic issues, like that's sort of, I don't take that lightly. But the reason I bring that up is it has something to do with Barcelona 92. And what I want to say about that is, this might be another situation where someone's going to say, oh, this flashback stuff has taken another dark turn, but I don't see it that way at all. So in like 91, 92, Ken started planning to like redo the plumbing at the dome. Because like I said, the dome was up on stilts, right? So the underside of the dome was just exposed to the elements or whatever. And when the dome was originally built, the plumbing was, just like in your house, probably the plumbing most likely runs underneath the floor. That's the way it was up there. And in the winter, the pipes would freeze. And if the pipes were not drained properly, they would crack, especially when they were copper pipes. But I mean, any pipe probably will crack if you let the water inside of it freeze. And so Ken had started planning out how he was going to redo all the plumbing. He was going to switch everything over to PVC, and then he was going to have the pipes come straight down from the floor and go down into the ground. And then, all of the sort of horizontal lines were going to be underground, which I guess would help. And he started working on it that summer, and he offered me a job coming up there and just helping him just do like manual labor type of stuff. Like he had already mapped everything out on paper, where we're going to dig all these trenches and do this, that, and the other thing. But of course, you would actually start digging and find out that there was a gigantic, 6 or 8 foot diameter granite boulder in the ground. And so all you could do is like, plan how to get around that, because you can't pull the boulder out of the ground or whatever. But, and I don't remember what he was paying me. It might have been like $5 an hour, which in 1992 would have been more than minimum wage. Because I remember I made pretty decent money going up there that summer. But we went up there twice. And again, I had never been up to the dome before. So it's like, finally I was going to see, this mysterious dome. And we went up there, I think, twice that summer for a full week at a time. And one of the weeks we went up there was during the Barcelona Olympics. And because of Ken's special interest in the Olympics, every night after work, we would eat dinner and we would sit down and we would watch the Olympics together. And that was just really cool, because up until then, like, I'd never spent time alone with Ken. I'd only gone like, my mom and Ken would go out to dinner and invite me to come with them, or he would come over and we'd watch a movie together or something like that. But I'd never spent time alone with him before. So that was kind of cool, especially since I had just recently lost my own father. So, but, I would go up with him. I've been up to the dome with him several times since then. But I remember we had like our little routine. Like we would come up, there's like a 2-lane highway that you take to come up to Yosemite. Because again, we had to actually go into Yosemite, and then you go down this side road where you leave the park and don't realize it. And then now there's this whole neighborhood there, even though it's up in the forest. But like we would stop always on the way up, we would stop at Subway. So we would drive through this town called Oakhurst. And Oakhurst is, I would think, has to be most famous for being the home of Sierra Online during what I would consider to be its heyday. Like I've talked before about how Stuart's dad worked at Sierra Online as a game programmer, and that's because of its proximity to where we lived. But that's one of the ways to get to Yosemite, is to go through Oakhurst. And so we would always stop at Oakhurst, and we would go grocery shopping, and we would stop at Subway. And this was back when I would say Subway was better than it is now. Like everybody talks now about how horrible Subway is, and I'm not saying it was ever great, but it used to be a lot better than it is now. And like I still like going to Subway for the same reason that like I like eating at McDonald's. It's really more of a nostalgia thing, because it's not like McDonald's food is not good, but it tastes the exact same as it did when I was 5. And, maybe the ingredients aren't quite as good a quality, I don't know, but a cold cut combo at Subway tastes the same to me now as it did when I was like, in high school or whatever. But I used to go to Subway kind of regularly with my mom. Like if we were going to go do something at night so we wouldn't be at home to have dinner, we would stop at Subway and get a footlong and split it. And we used to always get a cold cut combo because that was the cheapest thing on the menu that still had meat in it. So I got kind of sick of cold cut combos. Like I always wanted like turkey breast or something, but my mom was like, no, we have to order the cheapest thing on the menu. And I didn't argue because I understood, why. But with Ken, like, I could have whatever I wanted, because Ken didn't have those problems. So, I would always get like turkey breast or something. Or I remember what Ken liked to get was the hot pastrami. Because this was back when at Subway, the hot pastrami was kept hot in like brine. And so they'd reach in there with the tongs and like pull out the hot pastrami and like shake some of the brine off and put it on your roll. Like now everything's cold. Like if you got like a meatball sub, they stick the meatballs in the microwave or whatever instead of keeping them hot in the sauce. So that's like an example of how they've gone downhill. But he used to get the hot pastrami and I would get usually the turkey breast. But we would also stop at the grocery store. And I remember that we went to this grocery store. At that time, I think it was the only grocery store in town. Oakhurst was not a big place. But I remember they had, the carts had like these little electronic things on the handle where you could like type in what you were looking for and it would tell you what aisle it was on. And this was in like 1992, so it was just like a basic like black and white liquid crystal display like you'd have in like a wristwatch or something. But I was into computers back then, and so like I thought that was like really cool, to see that, especially in a place like Oakhurst. Like why of all places it's in this little mountain town. But I think the store, because it was a chain grocery store, and I think they were probably just like testing out the technology. But anyway, we'd go there and we'd go grocery shopping, because where we were, you can't just like drive somewhere at night to go get something to eat because it was going to be a long drive. So we would drive and buy a week's worth of groceries and we would take them up to the Dome. And but Ken can't cook. Like he was never somebody that could cook. So the kind of stuff we would eat, some of it I still eat now, partially I guess out of nostalgia. But like for an example, like Ken really liked to eat chili, but he would make like Ken chili because I mentioned that he grew up during the Great Depression, and so he had to eat a lot of beans because his mom would buy a lot of dried beans so that they could have protein, because they couldn't, meat was expensive. Meat is still expensive compared to buying beans. And so he had to eat a lot of beans. And so to this day, he doesn't like beans, and he has to have meat with like every meal because, his formative years were spent not having, meat and having to eat a lot of beans. I've kind of talked about before how I think, your formative years really have an influence on the kind of person you become. But anyway, so Ken chili, you got, for some reason when I was growing up with my mom and Ken, Stag chili, S-T-A-G-G chili was like, that's the chili to get. Like you don't want like Hormel or something like that, but for whatever reason, Stag was considered like higher quality chili. And so he would get 1 can of regular like beef chili, so that had beans, and then he'd get a can of chili with no beans, so it was just like meat and sauce, and then a can of corn. And you drain the corn and then mix all 3 of those things together in a pot, and that's Ken chili. And I mean that's 3 cans of food, so that's enough food, at least 1 meal for 2 people, if not 2 meals for 2 people if you have like a side dish or something. I ate a lot of canned chili when I was in high school, just because that's the kind of thing that my mom would go to Costco or something and buy a whole case of like Stag chili. But that was one thing that we would eat. And like another thing we would eat was sausage and cabbage, which I still, if you follow me on like Twitter or Instagram, I'm sure you've seen pictures, that I've posted of me eating sausage and cabbage. But the way Ken would make it, so he would get like, I think you can get this probably anywhere in the country. It's like Hillshire Farms sausage, where it's like that big U, which I think is a tradition. That's the more traditional way I think that kielbasa comes, is as a big U. So it was this Polish sausage so he'd buy that, he'd buy a head of cabbage, and he'd buy a Granny Smith apple. And he would chop it all up and put it in a pot with some water and like let it boil and then drain it. And then we would just eat that with like butter and salt. And, so the cabbage probably got a little overcooked. The apples got very overcooked. And unless he waited to add the sausage, that would have kind of gotten all the fat rendered out of it, which wouldn't be good. But I remember I liked that so much that I would make it, even at home because it was pretty cheap. But that's the kind of stuff we would eat because like Ken couldn't cook. But Ken's like one of those kind of guys where like the two things I just mentioned, like he thought they were great. So like to him it was fine, and to me I didn't really care. It was like, to me, I'm up in the mountains like hanging out with Ken and like making money and having a good time. So the food for me was fine. But the reason that I talked about the anxiety stuff first is that I was really struggling with that summer. But going with Ken up to the dome took me away from like all of the things that were causing those problems. And so I was going up there, I was breathing, the fresh mountain air. Obviously it was beautiful outside. It was the summer, but you're up at like 5,000 feet, so it's not that hot. I was getting up and putting on some old clothes and literally digging ditches and hauling rocks all day, which was kind of like keeping me occupied and giving me sort of a sense of routine, but also tiring me out physically, which I think helped. But it got me away from the situation with my grandma and just sitting around the house all day, and it got me away from all the things that were sort of reminders for me of why I was having these anxiety problems. And so some people might say that talking about something like this, like, oh, this is like a dark or depressing episode maybe or something, but to me it's not at all, because the time that I spent with Ken up at the dome that summer, that's like my strongest memory of the summer and my best memory of the summer. And when I think about the summer of '92, or anytime I think about the Olympics period, I think about that time that I spent with Ken up there, and just how much better it made me feel. So for that reason, for me, this is a positive topic to talk about, and those are, for me, positive memories. So that's, that for me is Barcelona '92, sitting on the couch at night with him, waiting for the wrestling coverage to come on, or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's about it. Well, so it's funny, when I originally was going to make this episode, I thought I knew what I had spent that money on, and it turns out that I would have been wrong. And I meant to go pull it out of the box just to hold up as a prop or whatever, but I forgot. But what I ended up doing with the money, because I was working, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, whatever, getting $5 an hour, and not paying. I mean, he would just pay me cash or whatever. So you can imagine, by the time I was done helping him up there, I had quite a bit of money. And so what I ended up doing with that money is buying a new hard drive for my DOS computer. You'll recall I had a 20 megabyte hard drive, which even back then, like 20 megabytes was like, I don't want to say it's nothing, but it got to the point where, I had DOS on there, I had Windows 3.1 on there. I talked about, in a previous episode, I talked about like those image viewing programs I had, like C-Show or whatever. And I had some images, that takes up space. And then you throw a few games on there, and before you know it, that's it. Your 20 megabytes is filled up. And so there'd be times where I want to install a new game, and I had to figure out, well, what am I going to delete? And if I delete it, do I have disks? Because, we were trading games around, and so I might not necessarily have floppy disks of a game that was on my hard drive. So if I delete it, like, that's it. But with this money that I made, working with Ken, and I'm sure also just doing odd jobs in the neighborhood, at home, mowing lawns and whatnot, I was able to buy a new hard drive. And I don't know if some of you guys remember, but back then you could buy a very limited amount of computer parts at Costco. And my mom had recently gotten a Costco membership. I think my freshman year in high school, she got a Costco membership, and that was back when you had to apply for a membership, and you had to meet certain qualifications as far as like the kind of job that you had, or you had to like own your own business. Like, not anybody could just walk into Costco, which I think probably has something to do with like the pricing agreements that they had with suppliers or something. I don't, because it was a wholesale store. That would be my guess. I don't really know. But so anyway, I got a hard drive there. It was about a 200. I think it was 255 megabytes, something like that, which at the time was huge. And that was back at a time where $1 a megabyte was considered a good price. So I paid about $250 for this hard drive. So it was a lot of money, for a high school kid. But, like I said, I worked a lot during the summer to get the money together to buy that, because to go from 20 megabytes to 250 megabytes was huge. I'm not sure if I ever filled up that hard drive. I still have that. That's why I was saying I wanted to show it. It's actually the only thing I still have from that computer, because everything else by now is gone. But I always saved the hard drive because I had my stuff on it. And of course, the data on that hard drive has now been backed up to a lot of other things. But it's all still on that hard drive, and that hard drive still works, which is pretty cool. I don't even have it in my DOS computer because I don't want to put any wear on it or whatever. But like I said, I don't really need that hard drive to still work because I don't really use it. But I still have it anyway. So that was the second to last major upgrade that I made to my DOS computer. So at that time, like now I've got, it's a 386 DX40, has a Super VGA monitor, which was a nice upgrade. And now I have a 250 megabyte hard drive. So we only have one more upgrade to make, which is going to be a topic for another episode of Flashback. So yeah, I don't know how this episode's going to go down with people. Like I said, I had some misgivings about talking about it, but if I can talk about personal experiences in a way that helps other people, then I'm all for that. So I was thinking for a while about we could play like an Olympics game or something to end the episode, but it's already about 45 minutes long, so I think we should probably just stop it here. As far as the next episode of Flashback, I don't know. I've got some ideas in the works. I have some other ideas in the works for episodes for this channel. Some are going to come out sooner than later. I'm still working on this PlayStation video for the other channel, so that's kind of my main focus right now. But yeah, that's it. Don't forget the postcard club. If you want to check out like I said, the address is in the video description. Send me a postcard. I'll send you a postcard. Please don't feel like you need to send anything else. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Flashback. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.